All right, so we're checking out the Oraimo Trcker 100 e-bike. This is one that's going to be has a huge carrying capacity, total of 550 pounds for those of you who want to carry a lot of cargo around. And then, of course, here in this very hefty rear rack, it can hold up to 330 pounds. So the frame material, they're calling this carbon steel. So obviously a bit stronger than typical to be able to carry all of that weight. And then this has a ton of range as well. So you have two batteries in this one here. They're both 500 watt hours, so you get a total of 1 kilowatt hour of battery. So I think it's 48 volts and 10 amp hours for each. So it gives you a total of, I guess, like 1 kilowatt hour in total capacity. And with that amount of battery, you're going to get a lot of range, up to 65 miles, just on throttle only, and then up to 100 miles on pedal assist. So in the back here, you have a 750 watt hub motor, and I believe it peaks up to 1,000 watts. And you got some nice 160 millimeter disc brakes back here. I believe these are mechanical disc brakes. You got a front fork suspension here, but there is no adjustment, no lockout. You got plastic fenders here in the front and in the rear. Seat height is adjustable, but there is no rear suspension on this particular bike. The seat here is actually pretty comfortable. It's hard to come out on video, but it's very thick, so it's quite comfortable to ride. Here's a look at the handlebar. So you have a half twist throttle here on the right. Got your brake lever there, a reflector here in the front. And on this side here is your bike controller, plus minus levels and power button there for your pedal assist and power levels. And there's no bike display, no speedometer or odometer on this one. You can get that as an accessory, but I believe that's an option you have to buy. Cable management on this one is okay. And they have these little clips there holding everything together. It's better than zip ties. And you got this foam sleeve that's holding everything together. And then all the wires go into the frame over here and down to the controller, which is underneath the bike. And this bike has one of those kind of unusual center-mounted kickstands, not the one that's on the back. So it does keep the rear wheel off the ground a little bit when it's actually put up. And another thing to note here is that this bike has no gears, so no Shimano shifter on this one here. It's a single speed. So obviously you're going to be probably mainly using the throttle on this one. I think once you get the bike up to speed, you can help it out. I'll help it along with a little bit of pedal assist. I will talk about that in the ride portion of the video. But before I get to the ride portion of the video, I do want to make some notes regarding the build. And this is fairly standard, straightforward in terms of an e-bike build. It comes, like 90% assembled. You just have to put the front wheel on and the front fender and the handlebar. So that's pretty much it in terms of the installation. It took me roughly 30 minutes to put the whole bike together. So not terribly difficult. And if you've built an e-bike before, this is really nothing all that different from a lot of other builds. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about how this rides. All right, so we're going to talk a little about the riding test and specifically the pedaling test. So this doesn't have any gears. So normally you would start off in a low gear, then work your way up as you increase your speed. Because this is a heavier bike, and especially if you're going to be using it as a utility or a cargo bike and loading it down, what I would recommend is, if you do intend to do some pedaling, is to actually use the throttle first to get the bike going. Once you get the bike going, then you can pedal it and it shouldn't be a problem. When you try and pedal it off basically from a stop, it is a little bit more difficult because basically you're kind of in a middle gear. Like say if you're on a bike that has 7 or 8 gears, it's kind of like starting pedaling when you're in like 4th gear. So while it could be done, it can be a little bit more challenging to get the bike going. So, make your life a little bit easier. I would say just go ahead, hit the throttle, get the bike going, and then if you want to pedal to get a little bit more range, then yeah, definitely do that. And I found that in the pedal assist levels 1, 2, and 3, you can pretty much pedal and you're not really freewheeling. But then once you hit about pedal assist level 4 or 5, the bike has enough speed where because you don't have any of the higher gears, you're basically freewheeling. So if you want to not use the throttle and pedal at those speeds, you're basically just pedaling to make the motor go, but you're not actually contributing to the effort in terms of moving the bike. So in levels 4 and 5, pedaling probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think that it's going to be most optimal for level 3. You're going to be kind of at the right speed where you're not too fast, but you're also not too slow. So you're just enough speed where you're actually providing some force to the bike in terms of pushing it along with the motor, but it's not just the motor 100%. Once you hit 4 and 5, it's pretty much the motor 100%, and then your pedaling is just basically like acting as a throttle to keep the motor turned on. Now, of course, there's no bike display on here, no speedometer, so I didn't really know what the speed was for each of the different levels. My estimate is that around pedal assist level 3, you're roughly around 11-12 miles an hour. 4 is probably like 15-ish, and then 5 is about a little over 20, I think. It is rated as a class 2 e-bike, and it has a speed limiter for 20 miles per hour, and it's definitely speed limited. I can tell the difference between a 20 mile an hour bike and a 30 mile an hour bike, and this is definitely not a 30 mile an hour bike, so what they're advertising is correct. It is about a 20 mile an hour bike at the top speed. And as I mentioned, as you increase the pedal assist levels, the speed does increase gradually as you go up in levels. It's also worth noting that if you just want to use the throttle and just give it a little bit of power and not the full power, because if you pull the throttle the whole way, it'll give you 100% power and you'll be at 20 miles per hour probably within about 10 seconds. So it does have some pretty good pickup with the, it's a nice, 1000 watt peak motor back there. So it does have pretty good pickup and plenty of power to move stuff around, especially if you're carrying around cargo. So keep in mind that it could get away from you if you apply too much power and you're not expecting it to kind of take off, because it can do that. But if you just want like half the power and half the speed, you can just turn the throttle halfway or around that amount to whatever speed level you want, and then you can just kind of hold it there, because it's a half twist throttle. You can hold it there with the other half of the handlebar grip, and you'll just maintain that speed kind of like cruise control. So that works pretty well if you just want to maintain a slower speed only on throttle. Overall, I found the ride very comfortable in this bike. It does have a front fork suspension, seemed to be tuned decently well, even though it's not adjustable. I wouldn't recommend going too much off-roading on this bike, especially if you're carrying around a lot of cargo. This is kind of a utility bike, really meant for like, city streets, sidewalks, bike paths, that kind of thing, smooth surfaces. While I did ride a little bit on the grass and stuff like that, a little bit off-road, it's okay. It's not the most comfortable bike in the world, because it is stiff frame in the back there. There's no seat post suspension. The seat itself is very comfortable. It's a very thick bike seat, and so it does absorb quite a lot of the bumps, but I wouldn't recommend this for extended periods of time, especially on rough terrain. But for your typical sidewalks, streets, and that kind of stuff, this is a totally acceptable bike in terms of the ride. I felt totally comfortable. The seat, I felt like you could ride it for an extended period of time without any issues. Overall, the build quality was very solid. The bike felt solid overall. No rattles or shakes or anything kind of falling off or loose. So the bike and construction and the bike build itself was overall, I would say, above average. So the one big downside on this bike is that it doesn't have hydraulic brakes. It comes with mechanical brakes. They're okay if you're not carrying around a lot of stuff. It's not too heavy. Like if you're just using it as a regular bike, the mechanical brakes will do a decent job. However, if you're carrying around the max weight of 550 pounds, especially on hills, these mechanical brakes aren't going to be good enough. And if you are going to be primarily using this as a utility bike and carrying a lot of cargo around, I would recommend upgrading these brakes to hydraulic brakes, and that'll give you much better stopping power, especially if you're carrying around a lot of loads. Anyway, overall, pretty good bike for the price. I'll put a link down in the description if you guys want to check it out. If you found this video helpful in your buying decision, please give the video a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that. And if you want more videos like this in the future, consider subscribing to the channel. That would really help out the channel. That'll do it for this video. Talk to you guys in the next one.